Thank you all for coming. When Kathy and I did discuss this, I'm not sure I said ROI twice, but I'll take it, and we will take the food, so thank you very much. But I did ask for a venue that would have very comfortable chairs, because I normally put people to sleep, so I wanted to make it a little easier, and a great view. So if anyone falls asleep, Pete, then I won't take it personally. So one thing that we wanted to do, and the gist of the presentation, was to talk about what's next and what we see next, 2011 and beyond. We do a tremendous amount of research at a holding company level and Arnold, so we'll share with you some proprietary research that if you're a client, we're happy to share more, and if you're not, we're happy to share a little less. But it's research that we're constantly in the field looking at consumer attitudes, brand attitudes, and kind of what's shaping our business. So when we spoke about today and what we talk about today, we thought that would make sense, as it's the beginning of the year, to give you our perspective on what we see as 5 big trends that have been happening, but that we see fueling marketing this year and beyond. So I'll jump in. But first, let me give you a paid infomercial on Arnold. Paid meaning you paid, by the way. So for those that don't know us, Arnold, I'm not sure where we'll rank this year, biggest Boston-based advertising agency. Great work works is our mantra, it's our philosophy, it's our belief as a company that creativity and commerce go hand in hand, and that the work that we do for our clients ultimately has to yield some kind of effectiveness in the market, whether that's driving people, young adults and teenagers, to smoke less, whether that's selling more CPG products, whether it's driving corporate reputation for some of the corporate brands we steward. It's a belief that we hold deep and has led to some of the great work that we've created. So that's kind of our start point in terms of who we are as an agency. In terms of where we are, and this, some of you may not know the breadth of our, we're what's affectionately known in the industry as a global micro network, although we like to say micro doesn't mean small ideas. So we have 15 offices, as Kathy said, around the world, 12 countries, and we believe we're in a great position in terms of our business structure for what clients want. Some clients will want 200 offices in 75 countries, and for that, we're one of 2 global networks within Havas. So we're also in a fortunate position in that being what we believe part of the most nimble holding company, where there aren't 10 advertising agencies and 3 other digital agencies, there's a lot of focus that we get and a lot of investment that's being placed behind Arnold. And so you'll see in the next year or 2 many more mergers and acquisitions that we'll be doing in the market to grow not just our business, but our geographic footprint. So I won't read you the list here, but we have 3 offices in the US. The US represents about 80% of our business today, although that's changing fairly dramatically every year. 5 or 6 offices in Europe. We're launching at the end of this, at the end of February in Australia, with offices in Melbourne and Sydney. We have an office in Shanghai and an office in Sao Paulo. So that gives you a sense of where we are. Some of the company we keep, a range of blue chip clients, great brands. We're proud to steward some of the world's most iconic brands, and very long-term relationships, from McDonald's to Carnival to Progressive. Many of you have seen Flow. We have a new campaign on air now as well. CVS Pharmacy, largest drugstore chain in America. Also, interesting fact, $100 billion company. Not a lot of people know that, but pretty impressive. Panasonic, Volvo, etc. We're agency of record for every one of Hershey's 15 brands across the world. So we're proud, and one thing that we hold dear to us is that we're not, and when we talk to clients, we're not an agency that has a specific house style. So if you want just a Super Bowl spot, or you want to laugh, or you want to cry, there are agencies where you can go just for that specific thing. That's not what we're about. Last year was a terrific year for us. We started this year as well with a win in our New York office, but we won close to, well, if you count the different brands, over 20 clients last year. In the US, about $800 million in billings. If you add incremental assignments, Hershey gave us 3 more brands, and if you add Europe, about 1.2 billion in incremental billing. So it was a pretty good year for us last year. And one thing that we're extremely proud of, this is from the Gunn report, over the past decade, 2000 to 2010, we're one of the 5 most creatively awarded agencies in the world. So Gun Report adds up a variety of different things. They look at generally more traditional media, and we're one of only 5 agencies that was ranked as highest in creativity. So that's the paid infomercial. And now I'll get into just a little bit on the state of the industry, some things that we see just to level set where we see things, and then what we're looking at as 5 big trends that are shaping how we activate our business and conversations we're having with our clients. The first, and this is no surprise to anyone, I think, is that the landscape today is more different every single day. I think in the business that we're in, we all need to be comfortable being uncomfortable and realizing that, and especially everything that's happening, not even just the digital world. I think digital gets a tremendous amount of attention, but I think that, you know, if we all focus as much on what's happening with data and with CRM, you know, there's you know, almost more innovation that's happening there today and at a quicker rate than in digital, just because of the emphasis and the focus that's been placed on the digital world. But there's more marketing, there's more noise, there's more media consumption. You know, we've all seen all of the statistics. I think the most important point is, you know, and when we talk to young people about our business, I think it's the most interesting time to be in our business, probably in the history of our business. I mean, maybe if you go back 40, 50 years, when advertising agencies had you know, test labs to be able to formulate claims for clients, and we're really working hand in hand in true partnerships with clients, you know, I think now is the kind of next generation renaissance of the industry. So it's an incredibly exciting time. But with that comes a big challenge, and we talk about really the shift of, you know, learning to work in a world where you have a captive audience to learning to work in a world where you have to captivate an audience. And again, we could all stand here and give similar presentations talking about what's happening in social and the fact that, you know, we could debate whether the 30-second spot is dead. I think the most important thing is today, what's most important is how you engage consumers and how you build a relationship with them, or customers, depending on whether you're a B2B brand or a B2C brand. And the whole conversation has changed. So I think what's becoming more and more interesting today is, and refreshing, is we're having less conversations with clients about how I can build my fan base on Facebook and whether I've got 3 million or 4 million or 5 million, and more conversations around I'd rather have less but have them be more activated. And I really want to understand how Facebook will lead to some intended action, which will then do whatever I'm trying to do to drive whatever metric I'm trying to drive in my business. So I think it's refreshing for us that we're starting to have those conversations with clients. I think the last few years, the whole world of marketing kind of became obsessed with the bright, new, shiny object, and that won't go away. But I think marketers are taking a step back, and we're certainly seeing this with, you know, many of our CMOs and CEOs, and we have a relationship with Spencer Stewart, which is arguably the best executive search firm in the world, and they have similar conversations with their clients. And when we talk to them about the types of people they're putting in CMO jobs, it's people who really understand that, you know, getting back to a lot of the basics of marketing. So I'm going to talk about 5 big trends that we see impacting our business, and I'll thread throughout it what we're doing as an agency in some key points, and then we'll open it up to some questions on the back end. So the first is the era of mindful spending. Massive shift in consumers today, really over the last few years, but today and going forward. And I'll talk about that. We could talk a lot about that, but we think this probably has the biggest implication in terms of how marketers act. We'll talk about multicultural mainstreaming. Everyone obviously knows about the 2010 census. They're kind of leaking data out slowly, but they'll release it all soon, and I think we'll share some of the statistics that we have on it, but this will dramatically change. I think for us as an agency, and we're about to launch a multicultural agency, multicultural is today, I believe, what digital was 5 years ago, where it no longer, you know, it was separate 5 years ago. You had your digital silo, your digital department. Maybe if you're an integrated agency, you still had digital people. Now everyone talks about, and good agencies have integrated it in the truest sense. We think multicultural is the same thing, and it's not just, doing in language or marketing to a specific subset. It's really understanding how that fits into your total communications plan and weaving it in. So we'll talk about multicultural mainstreaming. We'll talk about social, because how can you have a presentation and not talk about social? Reality trumps image, and purpose beyond profits. I think the last one was something that we've been talking about. We do globally at a Havas level more work for corporate brands than any other holding company, and so we have a specific whole separate research stream that looks at corporate brands. And what we saw, and corporate social responsibility, and what we saw was in 2010 it was a slight push on the pause button in terms of a lot of activity that brands have done, but the whole notion of consumers and customers caring about brands having a purpose, we think is a massive trend that will kick off bigger and brighter in 2011. So the era of mindful spending. I love this shot, the Gursky picture. There's so much choice in the latest book that we wrote, Consumed. We talk about the end of hyper-consumerism and the beginning of a new consumer era. Whenever we talk on this, especially in the U.S., the conversation is always around, well, Americans still want to drive their SUVs, and Americans still want to have what they want, and they still want to go to BJ's Wholesale or Safeway or wherever and load up their shopping carts. And I think that's true, and that will remain true. The difference that we see is the amount of thoughtfulness that goes into everyday purchases. We did we do a study every year, in-store ethnographies, where we shop with consumers around the world in major channels, food, drug, mass. And the difference between 2008 and 2010 in the same study in everyday channels, so specifically food and drug, consumers were spending 3 times more in aisle making a purchase decision in 2010 than they were in 2008. So on average in 2008, going through the grocery, any grocery aisle, any kind of rote purchase grocery aisle, consumer would spend a little less than a minute in that aisle. In 2010, that was 3 minutes. So for us, an implication and part of what we're doing as a business is looking at how we can leverage and how we can deliver to our clients a better understanding of communication in store, because whether it's on the web, whether it's TV, it's going to serve a role. But the point of purchase has become even more important today than it ever has, because consumers are picking up the package of Oreos and they're picking up the store brand and they're looking at it and they're saying, these are pretty much the same, or they're picking up some of the eco-friendly products or organic products that used to not perform as well and now perform as well, and they're saying, well, why would I pay 3x the price of something that I don't have to? So that's the gist behind this. This comes from our study. 8 of 10 consumers say they're maxed out, declaring that we've been experiencing not only a financial crisis, but a crisis of values and way of life. Heady, heady statement. Consumers are also smarter, and they know it. We've been talking about empowered consumers. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Time magazine had the Person of the Year, and they said it was you, the consumer. And I think the main difference is, well, one is the recession, or the whatever we want to call what we've just gone through, depression, recession, has been a catalyst to change consumer behavior. It hasn't been the only thing to change consumer behavior, because a lot of what we see percolating up now and a lot of the trends that we're talking about have been going on for 5 and in some cases 10 years. But it certainly has been the thing that the most important factor in terms of turbocharging it. So some stats from our study: 66% of US consumers say I'm a smarter shopper than a few years ago. 60% say I'm a more demanding shopper. 59% I do lots of consumer research online. And then the bottom number, which in our latest wave that we're just getting back right now, is here it's 54%. Our latest one is 62%. I trust customer reviews more than expert reviews. This I find really interesting, and one of the things, we just did a CMO summit where we had some of the, with Spencer Stewart and with an organization called M50, where we had 35 of the leading CMOs, global CMOs and US CMOs together for a half day, and we were talking about what's happening in marketing, and we had some experts into some panel discussions. And one of the experts was talking, and I found this pretty interesting, that if a product A has a user review and it has 1 star, and product B has 1 out of 5 stars, so not rated very highly, and product B has no user reviews, product A will do better than product B. So the whole notion of just having some form of input, and those user reviews obviously being from whether they're peers or just consumers like the person who's reading it, are extremely valuable. We also talk about a return to real. I mean, I think a lot of credit to Dove years ago for probably being on a trend that wasn't really a trend when they were doing the marketing that they were doing. 56% say the recession has served to remind people of what's important in life. 51%, I'd like to be part of a truly important cause. 71%, I'm making an effort to improve the person I am. You hear that, Pete? You got that? Okay. That's important. Yeah, okay, good. We just finished research for one of our corporate brands at a Havas level around the world, and one of the interesting bits of finding that came out of it is more and more consumers are saying to us, and this is the balance with this one is the degree of skepticism. More and more consumers are saying, I know that the marketer is spending more money for the pink ribbon or whatever the cause is in marketing that cause than in truly being a part of something meaningful. And so we always talk about, and I'll talk about this as the last area, purpose beyond profit, that consumers say it's okay for a company to be profitable as long as there's a purpose behind what they're doing. I like this quote from Chesterton. Eric and I were talking about this, and I said with a name like G.K. Chesterton, he must be dead. So, and he's an English writer and philosopher, and if we're quoting him, he has to be. He died in 1936, if anyone wants to know. But he says, there are 2 ways to get enough. One is to continue to accumulate more and more. The other is to desire less. That's very difficult for us agency folk to comprehend. I'm not sure if anyone saw the movie The Joneses, but the whole premise and the idea behind it of this kind of utopian family that lives in kind of middle mainstream American suburbia, and the reality is they're planted there by the marketing gods to help shill products. And I think this is the point where what is marketing and what becomes reality becomes interesting. But again, from the study, 67% of us would be better off if we lived more simply. 43% I'm committed to reducing my use of credit cards over the long term. And we're actually seeing a lot of this in, it'll be interesting this week because we have the Consumer Price Index coming out on, I think, Thursday or Friday. A lot of the major fiscal reports, a lot of earnings are coming out right now. But it will be interesting to see, how consumers are feeling. Cyber Monday this past year was the biggest online selling day in the history of online shopping, over $1 billion that day, up 16% versus the prior year. Retail, Black Friday, which is the brick version of the click Cyber Monday, was only up 0.9%. So still up, but nowhere near as much. Last one I find interesting too, I no longer want lots of bells and whistles on products I buy. I'd rather just really have the functions I need, which I think says a lot to design, says a lot to specifically industrial design. Obviously, we want form, we want function. I think one of the reasons why Apple and iPad specifically has done so well is that it gives you what you need in a beautifully simple manner. And then all of this, and we spoke about this a little bit up front. This whole rise in mindful shopping. There's a small little plug there. If you don't have, how many people have an extra care card? Okay, fantastic. If you don't, please go out and get one. It is a great loyalty program, the largest loyalty program in the world. We were corrected when we found that out. 62% say I'm using coupons and or seeking out other discounts. I mean, I think also if you look at the rise of all of the e-couponing sites, they're all on trajectories that we've never seen before. I saw a commercial last night, I forget what the brand was, but it's basically a coupon aggregator where you can click on all the coupons that you want at any different retail brand or retail channel, and it basically prints out the coupons that you want. So I think a lot of this goes back to, and what's interesting, what we see in the data is this is not just people that need to buy smart. People want to buy smart today. There's badge value in buying smart. A lot of the conversations that you see on on chats that are happening online today, and we're going to talk about social shopping and why we think things like Groupon are so successful. It's because it's, everyone likes to get a deal, but it's almost become, a group sport today to get a deal and to share a deal, and that's why you see so many of these sites taking off. Last one, 47% say in the past year I've been asking myself, could I find the same item for less at another store or on eBay? And again, in the last wave that we have that's just coming back right now, all of these numbers are trending up. And also, lastly, this whole notion of a rethinking of priorities. 80%, and these are large sample sizes of these studies, so these are all, in every market that we do at 1,000+ consumers. 80%, it's very important that families eat at least one meal a day together. We do a lot of work in the food category. The amount of families that have one meal together a day has decreased every year over the last 2 decades. So it is a big social issue in America today. 57%, it makes me feel good to support local producers, artisans, and manufacturers. Many different sites right now where you can go and kind of find, locally produced goods, locally produced crafts. We'll talk about this when we talk about the whole notion of corporate responsibility, but knowing the provenance of a product, where it comes from, how it was made, is more and more important to consumers today than it ever was before. So I'm going to share with you now, it's easy to share, I'm going to share a couple TV spots because it brings some of the stuff to life. This was done by Levi's as part of the Go Forth campaign, and I think it's a great example. All the people in the commercial were in the local community. I think it's a great example of being in touch with a local community, of understanding the values of a local community. Levi's then went, and this kind of ties into Trend 5, went and is donating $1 million back to the local community. But I think it gives a spirit, a sense of the emotion, the spirit of what I'm talking about.
We were taught how the pioneers went into the West. They opened their eyes and made up what things could be. A long time ago, things got broken here. People got sad and left. Maybe the world breaks on purpose, so we can have work to do. People think there aren't frontiers anymore. They can't see how frontiers are all around us.
So that would make me want to go out and buy a pair of Levi's, except my job's to sell you a pair of Lee jeans. So forget you ever saw that. Number 2, multicultural mainstreaming. I'll start to drive through this a little quicker. U.S. population increased 9.7% in the last 10 years. The forecasting out, if we go 10 years out to 2050, we're going to continue to see pace like that. So pretty impressive growth. I think the most interesting fact is African Americans, Asians, and Hispanics account for 80 to 90% of that growth. The minority is quickly becoming the majority, and you'll see in a moment in certain major metropolitan cities, and in California specifically, it is the majority. So the growth is expected to continue. If you look, percent growth go out to 2050. This is where the growth is coming from. Again, as I said, we're launching a multicultural agency, and the idea is not to just be able to, and we're fortunate in that some of the brands that we work with are leading marketers in the space, but what you find is that it's not just about doing a piece of communication in language. Second-generation Hispanics receive and want to build relationships with brands very different than first generation. Same thing with, massive difference between, Caribbean Americans or, different people of color in terms of where they come from, and we can't treat everyone the same as, within minority subsets as we did before. Some, I think, pretty astounding statistics. This is percentage of the population that are not Caucasian. New York City, 65%, Philadelphia, 58%, Washington, D.C., 72%, Miami, 88%. I mean, these are major metropolitan cities with millions and millions and millions of consumers. California, as a state, just turned in the 2010 census, 51% of the state is non-white. So, I mean, I think the good news is what the census is going to do is it's going to be a club to the head of marketers that say, you can't just have that fringe agency on the side, doing work and thinking that, I'm going to get, and there's tons of statistics about loyalty with minority consumers as well. So, smart marketers have been on that trend and understood it, but I think now it becomes similar to digital, inescapable. And the buying power is there as well. Those numbers are go up to, it's 1.4 trillion at the top. So if you look at, 2013, you're talking about, over $3 trillion in buying power is not a small number. It's numbers that, can easily build billion-dollar brands, help build billion-dollar brands. And they're also, significantly more accelerated than I think a lot of people give them credit for in terms of mobile devices, in terms of social networking sites, and leading the general population. So I think the statistics are all there. I think we're becoming more and more attuned to them. What I think is more interesting about it, with McDonald's, we talk about leading with ethnic insights, and we talk about, and it's a big thematic that they have as well, that it's not about marketing to a minority segment to capture share from that segment. It's leading with, and in some of the markets where we work with them most closely, New York, D.C., despite the numbers, that base is influencing the general population. And so, we've been talking about crossover appeal for the last decade, but I think today, it's not even a matter of crossover appeal, it's a matter of mainstream appeal. And the cast of Arnold, I mean Glee, and millennials leading the charge. Obviously, this generation, there is no color to them. I mean, it's, there's very little bias. It's I think, anyone who hasn't spent a lot of time either working with them, marketing with them, or to them, it's a very different consumer base, needless to say. And unfortunately, there aren't great examples of multicultural marketing. This is one that we like, that I think does a good job because of the mainstream appeal.
I faced one of the toughest challenges of my life right here. I couldn't swim. But I can still hear my drill instructor today.
Don't quit. If you quit now, you'll always quit in life. Go for it.
So I jumped in, unsure, apprehensive, and scared out of my mind. But I came up a Marine.
The proud, the Marines.
So social, I'll go through the last few quickly. Everything is social today, just as, I don't even think we can talk about what's digital today because everything is digital. I think it was interesting, what was it, a few weeks ago when all the storms were happening and, what was CNN covering? They were covering the fact that everyone was tweeting from which airline they were on and how long they were stuck without being allowed to go to the gate and, what that does for brands. The fact that we're just living in real time today, but with the ability to broadcast in real time as consumers, dramatically changes how brands have to act. And I think, I hit a lot of these. The important thing we find is that it's not just about understanding what's happening in this space or understanding what's happening better than anyone else in this space. It's that there really aren't that many brands that have truly understood, we think, how to leverage all of these different new channels of communication in a way that ultimately drives whatever their intended action is. And I think you'll see more and more of that in 2011 and beyond. Some things within social that we think are interesting. Social gaming. Love this statistic. There are 960,000 American farmers. Any guess as to how many people are on Farmville? 30 million? 40 million? And it's closing? Anyone? That's it? 40? 85 million Farmville farmers. It's crazy how many invitations we all get for helping people with their farms on Farmville. And I think this is, we all lived through the whole Second Life thing, but this is taking off at a significantly faster pace. So I think social gaming will be quite interesting. Location-based services, we have a lot of clients who are retailers. I think you're going to see this as a massive, massive boom. 80% of phones that are sold today, new phones, are smartphones in the US. It's a higher number in Europe. So I think, whether it's Facebook Places, whether it's Foursquare, whether it's Gowalla, you're going to see more and more marketers take advantage of this, where I'll be walking by a store, I'll have given my information, and there'll be a real-time coupon that's given to me for either a day part to go at McDonald's or whatever, go shop at the Gap. And again, this is where I think the intersection of digital and data becomes quite interesting. And then social shopping. I like the bottom statistic. Consumer reviews are nearly 12 times more trusted than descriptions that come from manufacturers. And on the top, the average consumer mentions specific brands over 90 times per week in conversations with their friends and family. So obviously part of our job as marketers is to get those brands that we're all stewarding mentioned, but mentioned in a positive light. I'll share with you just briefly, we just launched a new campaign for Carnival, one of the brands that we're very fortunate to work with. And the whole idea was that everyone has their firsts, and we want to be the kind of arbiter as a brand of all of these firsts. So we ask America, and we launched the campaign socially, which I think more and more brands are doing today. I don't think that's necessarily breakthrough innovation today, but we ask America, what it is that they always wanted to do. And so the campaign is called Did You Ever? There was a drive to Facebook, and people kind of click and create their own list. And then there's obviously a whole PR overlay to this in terms of which USA Today covered, and got millions and millions of media impressions in terms of what Americans always wanted to do. Also great data for us as a brand, and I think that's also an interesting interplay of push and pull from a marketing standpoint. So I'll play a quick video that was on Facebook to help launch the campaign socially.
What have you always wanted to do?
If I had the chance, I'd go skydiving.
I've always wanted to paint a giant mural.
I'd like to backpack the Appalachian Trail.
Travel across country with my band.
To go into space.
Write a novel.
Take a cooking class because I burn toast.
Enjoy life to the fullest.
I've never done this before, and I don't know if I'm going to do it again.
So what are you waiting for?
Whoa! Hello!
Did you ever want to put fun on the front burner? Did you ever want to tell better stories? Post stunning photos? Laugh a little more. Well, maybe this is your year to get fun done. To stop saying someday. Because someday starts today. Tell us what you've always wanted to do. Make your list. Share it with your friends and family, and join us in building America's list. Because when it comes to adding more fun to your life, there's no time like the present. It's time to make your list. And start living your list to the fullest.
That was awesome.
Hey America, did you ever?
I think one of the things that that's more important for brands today is that, if you're going to try to own an idea, especially a big idea like fun, you can't do it if you don't do it experientially. I'll talk at the end about Coke and what Coke did in their quest to own happiness as a brand. And we kind of fight this working with Hershey because it's so much a part of what Hershey is about, but you can't just do it with the kind of traditional means. So very quickly, the last two, reality trumps image, same person photoshopped, left and right. So what's real today, and how do you create a real brand? I mean, in all the consumer work that we do, it becomes more and more important for consumers to have a connection not just with brands, but with companies. And what we find is that when we ask consumers what's important to them and how they can forge a tighter connection, the whole notion of being true to who you are as a brand or as a company and being authentic and sharing that always rises to the top. Lady Gaga on the left and two people in Tokyo and me on the right, all Lady Gaga impersonators. You'd never know. So the opposite of real isn't fake. The opposite of real is cynicism. I love what happened just from a kind of pop culture standpoint with Conan and Jay that went down 6 months ago. I love how Conan embraced it. They formed, Team Coco. He went out there, and the whole massive backlash that was in, every single media channel against Jay Leno for really not being real, for not being true, for, taking something that wasn't his was tremendous. And I think, what you saw and the movement that you saw behind that really shows the power of, when people can get together and share a belief or share a cause, in this case a media one. Same exact thing here with Julian Assange. Even beyond what's happening with WikiLeaks right now, when he said he was going to take down a big American bank, Bank of America, obviously being one of the largest, got quite afraid because they thought that he had documents, and they still think, and we don't know where this is going to shake out, that they have documents on him that will take them down, or at least create some kind of irreparable harm. Same thing that happened with Barclays in Europe and with Julius Baer, two other banks in Europe, where he did release confidential or quasi-confidential information that then had, serious negative impact on their businesses and on their brands. So what is real? Is he real? Are the brands real? It's a bigger conversation in terms of First Amendment rights, but there are a lot of people in the country that today would say he has the absolute right to do this. He's not violating any law or any part of the Constitution, and there are many people that would say he has no rights. I think it depends on what you're talking about. Another great example from a few years ago, this past year and then this year, Tropicana, the backlash and it killed me when they got rid of that wonderful and iconic shot of the orange with the straw in it. And the backlash that was there, what I loved was the agency that did it in what I thought was a smart PR move. Instead of basically saying we fucked up, they said, yeah, we listened to what consumers had to say, and so we decided to go back to the old logo, which is a very nice way of saying we really fucked up. But the Gap, same thing, put it out there, huge backlash, what have you done? And it'll be interesting to see, Starbucks is getting a lot of negative media right now about what they're doing with their logo. So, I think even beyond what's real, it comes into question who owns brands today and what's, consumers' role in owning a brand that technically, obviously, they don't own. One of the last examples, BP. This is great. This was during Deepwater Horizons. On the right, BP Global PR is a fake Twitter feed that was created. And if you look at some of the stuff, I'm sorry you're upset. Please accept a free BP Cares T-shirt from us for only $10. And it goes on. It's great. You should spend some time on this. 180,000 people following this, 18,000 people following BP's actual Twitter feed for what was going on. So what's real? I mean, this is more real because it's what people are actually saying and caring about. And I'll share with you a piece of work that we've done in the past for the Truth Campaign, targeted Adweek's most awarded campaign of the last decade, targeted at youth anti-smoking. I think it's a wonderful example of just absolute honesty and clarity in communication. Pete almost got arrested too, which was great. And then the last one, purpose beyond profit. Again, the whole notion of, what's a corporation's role today? What's a brand's role? We've seen a decline in trust in virtually every major institution in the last 5 years, the last decade, whether it's the Catholic Church, banks, governmental institutions. And so consumers, and I think it's a great opportunity for brands, are looking for brands to play a more and more significant role because there's that void that's been left. And so we think brands that have a genuine purpose, that are true to who they are, we're doing more and more work today with a lot of the companies that we work with in helping them with their strategic philanthropic efforts. So consumers have put companies still under the microscope, and institutions. 65% as a consumer, I have a responsibility to censure unethical companies by avoiding their products. 57%, I prefer to buy from companies that share my personal values. We talk a lot about buying behavior, and how consumers shop is very similar to how we vote as a people. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of people get elected because they're the person I want to have a beer with, or I like what they stand for. Very similar today to how consumers choose the brands and the brand sets that they associate themselves with and that they buy themselves. The most successful and profitable businesses, we believe, in the future will be those that communicate and stand for something meaningful beyond the products and the services they sell. So obviously, you have to sell something that does something for a consumer or a customer, but we believe sharing what you stand for as a brand, being true to who you are, not creating that, will be incredibly important in terms of building that connection. I think the Pepsi Refresh project, which has got tons of press, is a great example. If I were to critique it, I think the fact that they're not doing a Super Bowl spot for it, and they probably PR'd that a little bit too much, my own opinion, but I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's the first of the kind. Amex did something like this years ago with Members Project. There are other smaller brands that have done things like this. There are brands that have built their entire proposition, like Seventh Generation, around socially minded causes, but I do think we'll see more and more of these types of things from brands. Timberland, great example. I think you'll see more and more in the food industry. You'll see more in healthcare. There's going to be so much more transparency. Is a massive trend that kind of lives within this, and I think you'll see more and more transparency that's coming from the company, not imposed by the government or any regulatory body. And Walmart, I think, is, you have to give them credit from going from, pretty much one of the most hated companies in the world to one of the most loved companies in the world, whether it's, $4 prescription drugs, whether it's, what they're doing in kind of leading the eco-friendly lighting revolution, what they're doing in making packaging smaller. Now, you could argue, okay, well, it's Walmart, and Walmart has the scale to do it, which is true, but they're still doing it. They're not the innovator in the space. I think Sainsbury's in the UK has been doing this for over a decade, but I think the speed in which Walmart has kind of caught up and is now a leading retailer in the space deserves a lot of credit. And I'm not going to play a video on this, but you should check out on YouTube. This was Coke's largest social media effort ever. They started it last year. They're kind of rolling it out now. They went to 206 countries where Coke sold around the world, put a team together. They traveled 150,000 miles, 365 days, and they basically wanted to kind of explore what happiness was, and they're kind of rolling that out now. So again, back to the whole notion of owning an idea, but owning it in an experiential way. So last slide, what this means, be mindful. We spoke a lot about this, but consumers are searching for better value. What's interesting in the study that we do, consumers don't equate lowest price, which you would think, as the highest order attribute to value. There are other things like service or how they engage with the company that actually fall higher in terms of how they define value. So the whole notion of being mindful, that consumers have a lot more opportunity, and we all as marketers need to realize that. Be inclusive. Cultures are converging, ethnic groups are growing, so it's both be inclusive, but it's also realize that how you market to the minority could shape how you market, and very well may shape how you market to the majority. Spoke a lot about social. I think, again, the interesting thing with social is not just about fans on Facebook or what you're doing on YouTube, but it's about how all of your different elements come together. being real and being purposeful, the last two areas that we spoke about, being a brand that is truly authentic, that is transparent. It's okay for a brand to talk about, when they haven't been done as well. I think, there's a lot more flexibility that's given to brands today, as long as there's honesty that comes along with that, and being purposeful, being a brand with purpose. So with that, I think we're over, and we have a few minutes left for any questions.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. As a multicultural marketer, I'm fascinated and intrigued by Arnold starting a multicultural agency. If we talked a lot about markets where there are majority minorities now, if Boston was your client, you can see where I'm going.
Yes.
What's the process? The 30-second version.
Well, what would the objective be? What would we try to be? What are we trying to do for Boston?
Boston as a welcoming, inclusive city.
Right.
In the context of
that extends beyond multicultural, doesn't that?
Well, in a multicultural context, based on our history, which is still an issue.
Right. Right.
In branding the city as a multicultural and inclusive and welcoming place to all people.
Right. I think there is some good that's happening in that space. We just need to shine the light on it. I think Boston probably gets I don't know how, I haven't been here long enough to know how fair or unfair the kind of picture that's painted on the lack of inclusivity for Boston.
A lot of it is perception.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think as a city and as a community, a marketing community, we need to find examples where that's not the case and shine the light on that.
Great presentation. You talked about getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right.
What makes you uncomfortable?
Everything. Literally. I think you can't keep up in our business, and I think you just have to accept the fact that you can't keep up. We spent last year, and I think we hired some of the best people in digital in the U.S. and even from around the world, and even in conversation, from great digital pure plays, RGA, AKQA, Goodby, Crispin, et cetera, integrated agencies as well. And even people who have lived it for 10 years, I think the common thread that you see from people like that is just accepting the fact that I can spend the entire rest of this week becoming super savvy on one aspect of Facebook, and that will change next week. So I think our job, it's challenging because our job is to steward brands and to be able to offer counsel to clients. But I think in conversations we have with clients, it's okay to admit that we don't know everything, but that we know enough to help guide where it needs to go.
I'm curious, it's sort of daunting. You talked a lot about all the options out there for various consumers to voice their opinions and perceptions. How do you manage reputation? How do you keep track of a brand's reputation in such a disparate environment?
I think what you'll see more of, and prior to being at Arnold, when I was at Euro, we were the global agency of record for ExxonMobil, which was without a doubt when we started working with them the most hated brand in the world. Gas in the U.S. was at different in Europe because of the tax situation, but gas in the U.S. was at $4 a barrel, and they were announcing record profits of $40 billion a year, $10+ billion every quarter. And I think, part of what we realized we had to do, I remember one of the first meetings I had with Rex Tillerson, who was the new CEO at the time 5 years ago, replaced Lee Raymond. Lee Raymond didn't really care about what the public thought about the company. Rex did, was the opportunity to go on the Today Show. And he was literally a few weeks into his job, and we sat around and we kind of discussed, well, should you do it, Rex, or shouldn't you? And Matt Lauer had made the invite to all the heads of the other, big 3, big 4 oil companies. And we said to him, you absolutely need to do it, because you need to go out there and you need to speak your piece, speak your mind about what you're doing, because there is, and this is not defending oil companies, but there's a lot of great things that oil companies do whether it's job creation, whether it's investing in technology, et cetera. There's a story to be told, and if no one's going to tell that story, then the public's going to tell that story for you. So I think the first thing is, you know, if there's a story to be told, and generally I think there is for most companies, get out there and tell that story. Never fabricate it, but tell it. And I think the other thing that you'll see more and more companies do is the whole notion of really kicking into high gear social listening and doing something with it. So more and more brands now are literally creating social listening centers within the companies, almost like you know, command centers. And a lot of companies call them social listening command centers, and they're listening to what's happening, and then they're acting in real time. So I think, you know, the combination of being true, getting your message out there, but also realizing that, you know, there may be an end game to your message, but you're going to have to zig and zag along the way, and understand that that's how you have to do it, is how companies, I think, will be successful.
And are those organizational changes taking place both in the agency and at the advertiser, or at the sites?
Well, the change that's happening on the client side is that corporate public relations, and to a certain extent, depending on the company, investor relations, is becoming a CMO role. So it didn't used to. So I think as more and more companies evolve to that model, I think that's when you get, because everything is marketing today. And so I think that's where you'll start to see change happen at a more accelerated pace. I think for agencies, it depends on whether an agency has a client where, and there aren't that many clients in the US, where your job is in increasing the reputation of the company. Generally, if you steward a big corporate brand, or if part of your assignment's in corporate branding. And in that case, then I think, you know, smart agencies, you know, understand how to manage it.
There's been a lot of consolidation in the last few years. I'm wondering, what is Arnold focusing less on, and has it consolidated its focus around certain industries, or is it more of a broad offering across industry?
Great question. We have a set of focused sectors, and for each of our sectors, we have sector points of view and kind of our selling strategy for sectors. So for instance, in healthcare, we talk about how we believe we're one of the only integrated agencies that manages the entire healthcare ecosystem. So we go from drug development to dispensation. So we have multiple biotech companies that are our clients. We have RX drugs, we have OTC drugs, we have hospitals as clients. We have, obviously, with Aetna, the number 3, $40 billion health insurer, as a client. We have causes, Truth, CDC, et cetera, as clients. And we have the nation's largest drug chain, CVS, as a client. So we focus on core sectors, and within the core sectors, retail is another one. We have our own selling strategy for what we believe makes us a relevant choice to clients. And then within sectors, we then also have what our growth plans are. So, and I think the ones that we focus on are the ones that most agencies probably do. I think, we were underdeveloped, we still are underdeveloped versus our peer set if you look at revenue in healthcare. And I think that's it's a massive area. We probably over-index in consumer packaged goods. We have a tremendous amount of retail. We had a bigger travel and leisure practice than we do today. So, and we also are restructuring to be organized that way. So we're across the globe building global centers of excellence that are sector specific, but also practice specific. So they'll be done by sectors, but they're also done, New York, and, Boston and London for us are the retail centers of excellence for us globally. And so we break down in a matrix way how we manage it.
Are there certain things you've stopped doing since the recession that you were doing a lot more of?
Yeah, I don't think there's nothing that we've stopped doing. I mean, obviously we do more digital today, and we do more innovative digital. So, what I'd like to do less of, and I think by the nature of what's growing, we're naturally doing less of it, is we're doing less banners, and we're doing more interesting things in the digital world. I think that's the nature of the volume of business that we won last year, and some of the clients that we've had in the past, like Carnival, that are digitally savvy clients that we have significant digital relationships with that go far beyond digital advertising. So I wouldn't say we've stopped it, but we're doing less of it. But it's because we're doing more of other things.
about being real and having a purpose. As everybody starts doing that, doesn't the cynicism then kick in?
Yeah, well, I don't think everyone can do it. So I think that's the first, I think you can only do it if you're true to who you are. And I think that, I don't think, so I don't think that, Coke could come out now and try to follow in Pepsi's footsteps in what they've done. I think it's a fair watch out. This is what we've seen when we just did the research globally, as consumers saying to us, well, so many brands are attaching themselves to causes, and what's real and what's true. And I think we are beginning to see consumer confusion around how meaningful is the relationship they have either with that cause or something that they've developed themselves. I think I guess the opposite side of that is I think there are a lot of companies that have great stories to tell that are just gun shy of telling them. Hershey's a perfect example. Last year was the first marketing effort that we did for Hershey around the Milton Hershey School, which is probably the most true, best, most innovative example of a company putting their money where their mouth is for 100 years, and they never said anything about it. So I think you'll get, because there is this tidal wave moving in this direction, brands that glom on to it, but I don't think they'll be effective. And I think the ones that will be effective are the ones where it really comes out of the ethos of the company.
You mentioned CMOs taking over investor relations. Do you see many of them taking over employee relations or employee engagement activities?
Very much so. I mean, I think another big white space for our industry is internal communications. I mean, so many of the clients that we have, because we represent Fortune 10, Fortune 20 clients, we're talking about employee bases of 30, 40, 50, 100,000 people. When we did the work for Exxon, another thing that Rex said to us is, I don't care what's on Meet the Press, your #1 goal is my 86,000 employees around the world. And I think, generally that lives in the HR domain. We're actually starting to get more and more RFPs right now for smart leading companies looking for tier 1 agencies to help them with internal comms.
I'm just wondering, since agencies so long have been driven by awards and creativity, is there a process or direction now being applied to social media or digital media to start to drive a creative process of some kind? So that
you mean with regards to awards?
Ideas, concepts, solutions, execution.
So is there I'm not sure I understand the question. Is there a process in...
Well, it seems to me that a lot of the social media, digital,
right,
is now starting to use techniques that are unique.
Right.
And I look at it as maybe a start of a creative approach.
Right.
And how that is developed, how it's driven, and maybe is it the crossover from the traditional creative guys
right.
to that? And it just seems like that might be lacking. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Arnold's different than any agency who, has woken up in the past few years and realized that the world's changed and we need to change as well. We're completely integrated in that not only do we have digital, we have promotion marketing, we have design, we have, brand experience. And I think this is similar, one could argue, to the history of our business, that, it's always been great ideas that have led the way. So now when we brief, whether it's an existing client or a new business, we don't say, and I don't think we're alone. I think the majority of agencies, I hope, do this, start with what the idea is and then figure out, I think we're a bit ahead of the curve in that we've built an engagement planning practice. We're much more interested in how the customer journey plays out and what the role of each form of media is. But we don't start and say, give me a 30-second spot. But I think, if you go back 40, 50 years, some of the best agencies didn't start and say, give me a 30-second spot. They said, let's create a soap opera, and let's create this, and let's create that. But it came off of an idea. I mean, it would be the same as, I think, digital being a silo, or 20 years ago, if you had an agency and you said, well, I'm going to have a print agency, or I'm going to have a radio agency. So I think there's two reasons why we're embedding it. In the last 5 years, Arnold was Promotion Agency of the Year twice, but we don't have a promotions agency. For us, it's the same thing with multicultural. I'd love to win Multicultural Agency of the Year. I mean, that's our goal, 2-3 years from now, but I don't want to have a multicultural agency. So when I say we're building a multicultural agency, I mean a multicultural, and I should have been more specific, practice, discipline, hiring specific talent, making sure we're able to deliver it, at the same level as Vidal or any of the other Hispanic or African American or Asian American agencies, but totally baked in and not treating it as an afterthought.
You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that you thought there was tremendous opportunity for an agency to start affecting the in-store experience. I was wondering, as an agency that has both CVS and an account like Hershey's, where do you see the opportunity to influence the consumer experience? Do you see it more as an agency at the FDMC level, or at the point of sale, or like in the aisle?
I think all of the above. I mean, we're looking at from an acquisition standpoint, we're looking at design agencies right now that do both in-store communications, but also do industrial design. So the actual customer experience, in store. So how do we take the, and this is where I think, anyone who's in a more of a general integrated agency, I think those integrated agencies are winning the war, because more and more clients want one point of contact. Granted, you need to be integrated specialists, but that for us becomes a specialty practice in terms of how you engage consumers in store. Could be through messaging, could be through the in-store environment, could be through design, could be a variety of different ways. Technology. Great, thank you.